This is a Murakami Minute, presented by the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm an absolutely ordinary guy. Less than ordinary. I live a horrible life. All I do is eat, sleep, and shit. I don't know why I'm even living. Why should a person like me have to be the one to save Tokyo? Katagiri, from Haruki Murakami Super Frog Saves Tokyo. We are back with the new edition of a Murakami Minute. Today we are part 1 of Manga Stories. We are reading Super Frog Saves Tokyo. That's the first story in this collection.
It is.
And it is a doozy. Before we get into the art and stuff, we went different routes with this. I read the short stories first.
Yeah, and I read the manga stories first.
There's no real wrong way to do it, but obviously if you read the prose, you're going to get the full story versus the condensed adaptation, which is what the mangas are.
Or just even like with any kind of visual storytelling, like the descriptions and stuff that you normally get in prose, you don't have to worry about reading it because it's there visually.
Yeah. So far, I've read the first 2 stories in the manga and the first 3 stories, the prose versions.
Yeah.
With the first 2 stories in this collection, you don't really miss a lot.
No.
If you just read the manga versus the short story, you'll miss some of the philosophical bits, but like the main stuff's here.
Yeah.
Whether you could say this constitutes a Murakami story, other than the weird themes and stuff, it's kind of hard to say. If you just read this as a manga, you'd be like, oh, this is very weird.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it would read like a Murakami story necessarily, because again, you're going to lose some of those philosophical bits and a lot of the meandering thoughts that Murakami likes to incorporate with his work. One thing I will say right off the bat, this isn't a fucking manga. It's not. This is an American comic.
Yeah. Well, we don't know if there might be in a manga version. They might have, they can switch things, what I mean, and stuff like that. So there might be an actual manga version, like, a
real one. Yeah,
like over in Japan and stuff like that. And they might have just, switched it for the American version because they know some dumb Americans have trouble reading in the opposite way.
Well, just for the sake of argument, I'm still going to say this isn't a manga.
Yeah.
What we're holding here. Other than the fact that it's Japanese stories, but it's not even, the art's not even a Japanese person. He's French, isn't he? The artist?
I wasn't sure what that name.
PMGL. I looked it up when we did the introduction, and it was like Pierre. Wait a minute, here it is. No, they don't have his fucking name. That's weird that they don't have his name on the. Like, they gave the biography, but it doesn't have the actual full name, but it was like short for, I think, Pierre something or other.
Maybe that's just like his handle or whatever. Yeah, what his Nobleplan or whatever that's called. Nobleplan or Noble
pseudonym?
Yeah, but there was a fancy word for it.
The French word I don't know either. I know what you're saying, but I've never said it out loud but day in my life.
Nobleplan.
Blum 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 blum. Hold on, I got this fella.
You got him?
Probably a lady.
But regardless, I mean, manga, comics, it's too much of the same thing,
Yeah.
Visual storytelling.
I don't know where I found the fucking name for this person before, because now I'm like not finding him. I'm just finding a bunch of. It's like, yeah, he's the illustrator. I get that, but where did I see?
He's a mystery man.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a Frenchman. That's gonna bug me if I don't find that.
You sure you just didn't want him to be a Frenchman?
I like the French. I actually don't. Oui, oui.
It'd be weird then with that first story with the big frog if it was a Frenchman.
Shut up. I don't know. I can't find it now. It was on something I looked up, but it's gone.
Maybe you can put it in the notes later.
Yeah, I don't think it's important. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about who did the art. You know what I'll say? The art is different.
Well, you know what is weird? Because originally flipping through it, like the first time, just like, checking it out, I thought it was different art for different stories. But it's the same guy just changing his style up kind of, which I thought was kind of cool.
A lot of people that gave this negative reviews, one of the main critiques, they thought the art was hideous, scratchy. I thought it fit the story.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the characters are very ugly, but I don't think they're supposed to be attractive characters.
Right.
Where did I want to go?
I mean, I've definitely seen worse.
Yeah. Well, Super Frog Saves Tokyo is about a salaryman named Katagiri who lives his normal life, Spencer, The way this is portrayed is he's a man that gets shit done.
Mm-hmm.
He works for a loan company, and he's almost like a loan shark, like a corporate loan shark. So these people, they take loans, they don't want to pay him back, and they send this guy like he's the leg breaker, but he's not. He's just he never fights or anything.
He goes to all like the hard places to get, like where nobody would want to go to get the loans. He's the guy that goes there, and like he kind of gets the respect from the people that where the places he goes, because they're like, well, fuck, like I don't want to mess with that guy, like.
But he's like just an unassuming guy, but that's why they respect him and they fear him. Mm-hmm. It's not because he's ever beaten anyone up or caused any kind of scene. It's just because he doesn't seem to really care about his life too much. He's like a bachelor and whatever. So if he died, he wouldn't care really. If they beat the shit out of him, they shot him. So that no fear of his own life is just like, they just see it in him. Like, oh, fuck that. I'm not dealing with that guy. But it's a weird story. Basically, he comes home one night and there's a giant frog in his house and his apartment, and they have a discussion. The frog needs him, the Katagiri, to help him save Tokyo from a giant worm underground.
That's going to cause a huge earthquake.
It's going to kill hundreds of thousands of people.
I think it was like 1,500 or something like that.
No, it was hundreds 150,000. Yeah. That means Tokyo. There's going to be more than that. I think this was written maybe in 92. Also of note, I believe the short story version I read was in the New Yorker. Is that the one that was in the New Yorker, or is that GQ?
I think that one was GQ.
GQ. So if you look it up, you could read the stories for free like we did. But most like the GQ, and I know the New Yorker for sure, you only get one chance, and then you have to be subscribed. You get one free article. So that would be your free article. If you click on it, don't click on it, and then go, I'll read this later, and go do something else, and then click on it again, it won't let you read it. So just read it the first time, or, do something. Basically, he has to help the frog, and there's some philosophical bits about, like, life and stuff like that, but it was kind of lost on me. I didn't think it was that deep. You do get a little bit attached to this frog because he's a cool character, and then ultimately, here's the spoiler, Katagiri gets shot on the street, and this is where it gets muddled. And he wakes up when he was on the way to help the frog.
And also, too, because it was like Karagiri, or however you say his name, his main goal is there just to like root the frog on.
Yeah, he's not going to help in the fight. He's just going to cheer the frog on. And that's what the frog wants, which is strange. So what ends up happening is on his way to help the frog, which he's very reluctant to do so, but the frog helps him by getting a hard loan solved and just by being a big frog.
Yeah.
Scaring people. Like, what the fuck? Don't send frog after me again. Right. I like too, because he always calls him Mr. Frog. He's like, just frog.
Just call me frog.
Just call me frog. So, and then there's some ribbit. We'll get into the onomatopoeia stuff that was cracking me up.
Yeah.
There was like some ribbiting. He's like, oh, I'll prove I'm a frog. And he ribbits. But he helped him with the loan to prove that he's real.
Yeah.
But then he's at his office like, no one else can see me. What the fuck the loan guy? I don't know. Apparently this thing's got powers where it can be seen when it wants to be seen. Regardless, Katagiri is going to help him, but he gets shot on the street, wakes up in the hospital, and it's all over. Turns out he was in a dream. He helped the frog because the frog ends up showing up in his hospital room, and turns out he's no injuries. Like Katagiri, he didn't get shot. There was no shooting. So you don't really understand why he just
passed out on the street.
Yeah, and you don't really understand why that happened or how he ended up.
And slept for most of the day.
Yeah, but then he did help the frog in his imagination by pedaling an electric generator bike thing that lit up the underworld, and
by cheering him on and a whole bunch of stuff.
And the frog fights the giant earthworm, who the reason why the earthworm wants to cause an earthquake and destroy Tokyo is because he is always sleeping. And his brain's basically jelly at this point. There's no thought or anything. But through some weird chemical process that's not described, it turns sound into aggravation or something. Yeah. And finally it builds up to the point where it's going to rampage. And that's why Frog has to save the day. Frog shows up in his room and in a very sad scene explodes with very gross pustules that turn into worms.
Yeah.
And it's shown in the book, in the manga, but in the short story, the worms crawl up the dude's wiener and asshole and mouth, and but then it turns out didn't happen again. And
so we don't even know how much is actually real, how much.
And which is a theme in all the stories. I haven't read the last one yet, so I don't know. But all the other three, first three stories, no endings.
No.
No real ending. So this one did not have a real ending either. You don't get any answers, which is very aggravating, but also that's Murakami for you. Let me just show you something fucking weird. And again, at least in the short story format, and I think it translates pretty well into the manga, Murakami is very good at making such a weird, bizarre situation seem normal.
Yeah, just mundane.
Like you just like the monkey story we read in the first person singular, you very quickly adapt to the fact there's
a
giant frog, real. Yeah. Okay, we get it. And
we're going to go with it.
And also mundane.
Yeah.
How do you make a giant frog that's fighting a giant earthworm be mundane? But he does. It's a skill. It's a weird skill, but it is a skill. A couple more things.
And so, do you want to like the differences between the...
Yeah, so obviously the prose version, like I said, has more philosophical bits and more, it's just more Murakami.
Yeah.
But either way is fine. Now, I saw this in the complaints, and I don't think it actually applies to the short story as much as the manga. People were complaining that Murakami always has to throw in weird sexual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In the manga, there's a scene where it shows him randomly banging a prostitute, and then he talks about his super tight foreskin.
Yeah.
And this is one instance where that wasn't in the short story. In the short story, he does talk about the last time he had sex was 3 months ago, and he had to pay for it. But it didn't show anything, and I don't think did he mention his foreskin in that story? I don't remember that. I don't
believe so.
I think that was just made up for this.
Yeah, but like we were talking about before off mic, because how we said we read it on GQ, so we don't know if maybe GQ didn't have the full, like maybe they edited it, like, a little bit, like they didn't want to have him talking about his foreskin.
It's very possible, and also, which I probably should have brought up at the very beginning, I think that the because I don't know if the adapter, which is John Christophe Devaney, I don't know if that adapting it means he also translated it himself.
Yeah, that's
because
I'm not sure.
I don't remember who did the GQ translation. It was either Jay Rubin or because I read one that was like a Philip something, which I've never read his translation. I think every version of every short story I've read so far was a different translator.
Oh, okay.
But I'm pretty sure this first one was Jay Rubin, which I'm very familiar with his translations. And I noticed the manga is slightly different. Like, it's pretty much verbatim from the story, but slight changes, which is obviously just the translations. Now, I want to talk about the onomatopoeias real quick.
Yeah.
They're so fucking... Japanese onomatopoeias are so weird. I don't know if it's just when they're translated to English, it doesn't sound right.
Because, I think also, too, like, they have certain, like, of their kanji, is that, or
kanji,
are for certain like sound effects that we don't have word, like, it's like the weird, like when you don't have a word to match with another like culture's word, like, it's like a weird thing like that, I think.
So I'm just gonna point out a whole bunch here. Here's a fire because he was lighting up a cigarette, so he's pulling a cigarette from the pack. Okay, maybe that's the cellophane, and then he lights the cigarette. Shup. And then, as he's puffing the cigarette, GD. I was like, okay. And here's my favorite. When the hold on, I gotta go even more. So here's Katagiri scratching his head. Pori. That's the sound of scratching your head. Then the frog, he wants to prove. He said, are you, Katagiri says, are you a real frog? Not a metaphor, not a fantasy, a real frog. You want me to croak? Giro. Like, what is Giro? Giro. That's not quite correct. But I guess maybe when they decided to name this Manga Stories, they thought if they had the original onomatopoeias, that would represent a manga format. I still think they should have just did these backwards like an actual Japanese manga. Come on, we're sophisticated enough. We can handle it. Especially if you're reading Haruki Murakami. Like, why? Well, come on, you already are expecting it. Because who's going to read a Haruki Murakami manga other than Haruki Murakami readers?
Yeah.
It doesn't make much sense. Maybe the people who listen to this podcast and are interested in it. Now, this was actually a right-on sound. So the frog jumps really high in the air. He's leaving. Pyong.
Yeah.
That's like a pogo. I could get that one. And I think I saw some really weird ones in the detective one. That
well, what about the there had to be sound effects when the things were busting out of him and the worms were coming out of him.
Well, let me get there, but first I want to point out the phone ringing. And then when you hang up the phone, it goes, gotcha. I don't know why they...
Hey, you don't have a Japanese phone. You don't know what sound it makes.
Yeah. When he's sucking this lady's breast, it goes, kuchu. And then she says, ha ha, or somebody says, ha ha. And it does show his wiener in this, but it's very flaccid at the end.
Very tiny.
But I do love the depiction of the frog, just over animated in a lot of the scenes.
This one, it was like a lot. If you look at the art, you could like see like the original kind of like sketch like outlines, kinda.
Yeah.
Like I almost thought like I messed up, like I wasn't paying attention and like messed up the pages in my book or something like that. Almost like.
What sound does a gunshot make?
I would assume either bang or pow or...
So close. Bon. Close enough. They do have normal splashing sounds. I won't bore people too much more with this, but I want to see the gross worm popping. What sounds does the worm popping make? And in the short story, it's a very depressing scene, actually. The frog, when he dies, goes, gwah! This is what I loved. So, and maybe this works. So here are the sound effects for the things bursting and then the worms coming out of the frog's corpse. So when he dies, he goes, pichu! And then the sounds are, peachy, 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 peachy. And then he goes, frog! And then we have, pachi, 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 peachy, 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 pachi, gunyo, 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 Zorro, Zorro, Zorro. I don't know what the Zorro is. Is that them slurping out of the...
Maybe.
Yeah, because then there's a bunch on this page. Zorro, Zorro, Zorro. I don't know what Zorro is. And then there's some Zubus when they're going in him.
Oh, yeah.
Zubu, Zubu. Pachin. Pachi, pachi, pachi. And then when she clicks the needle, it goes ton, ton. So that was a fun story. Did you get any real takeaways from that? I don't, like I said, now the detective one, the where I'm likely to find it was next week's episode. That one, there was a lot of philosophical bits I liked.
Yeah.
This one, though, I didn't. It was fun. It was weird. I understand why they started with this story, but I don't think there's really much to extrapolate there.
Yeah, it doesn't have much of a, like you said, to draw upon or anything. I think it's supposed to just kind of be more of like a fun kind of, story.
Like the most
probably like action packed that like I've ever, kind of Murakami stuff.
Yeah, the most Murakami philosophy I was really able to take from this was this line by Frog. What you see with your eyes is not necessarily real.
Yeah.
And that was like about it. I mean, there was a couple other little nuggets like that in there, but nothing, not much. So on a rating of 1 to 5, what do you give this story? And are you going to rate the short story and the manga separately?
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I say 1 more. We read them both.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably give them both like a 3.
Yeah, I concur. The art gives it something.
Right, yeah.
But then also,
I do enjoy the art. Like, I don't have an issue with the art.
Though the medium does take away a bit from the short story itself. Again, I felt that more with the detective story because you lose a good bit of exposition, but it does kind of make up with the cool, like, atmospheric, like, because it's black and white, that story. And I don't know. I think when we get to that one, I'll have a little more to talk about. But this story, it's a fun story. You could read it for free in, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or something.
Though, I do hate reading all the stories off,
the phone.
Yeah, it was terrible. Because
you just keep scrolling and scrolling.
Well, and also, too, because...
so many ads.
Well, yeah, and then also, too, like, because, like, I read those first, so, like, I have an idea what's going on. And I'm just like, I know this thing's almost over. Like, what the fuck's going, like,
You know what's going on? Gunyo, 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 pachi, 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 pachi. Pichi, pichi. Bang. Yeah, I give the short story a solid 3, and I give the manga a 3 or a 3.5. I could go either way. The other way, the short story could get 3.5 as well, and, vice versa. No ending. No real ending. No. I didn't, like, the guy just ended up passing out in bed or whatever, and it's like, did it really happen? I guess that's what it's supposed to not represent, but to, make you think, did this really happen? Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I almost kind of get, like, it was almost like a Fight Club, but with a frog.
Yeah, it was like Fight Club, but with a big frog.
Instead of Tyler Durden.
Frog. Tyler Frog. Giru. So that was a Murakami Minute. Next week, we'll be discussing the second story in this collection, Where I'm Likely to Find It. And again, you can read the short stories for free if you don't want to read the mangas or buy the manga. And honestly, you're going to take more away from the stories because Murakami is a good writer.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose a lot of that when you only have a certain amount of room in the manga collection. So go ahead and at least read the stories because they're free. And why not? And maybe you'll like Murakami, though I wouldn't say these are best represented, like a good representation of Murakami's work.
I think
necessarily.
We've almost said that about like every short story we've read of his almost.
I'm going to go ahead and say maybe he's just not a great short story writer.
Yeah. It seems like he needs a little bit more room to breathe and grow with the story.
Yeah. His novels are definitely better, and it's a shame that you haven't read more.
Yeah.
Because we keep doing these short stories because it's easier for this, but when we do 1Q84, I'm really excited to see what you think of that. I don't know how fucking long that a Murakami century.
Right, that's going to be a definitely multi-parter.
Yeah, but anyway, we will check you next week with another Murakami Minute. We'll be discussing where I'm likely to find it.